Hello and welcome to the most dangerous gangs you'll ever hear about, MS-13. MS-13 is one of the most feared gangs not only because of their manpower, but because of the brutal methods they use. But before we get into that, let's go back all the way to the beginning. It's the 1980s in Los Angeles, California, and refugees from Salvador started coming into the United States to escape a civil war at the time. But when they got to LA, there were gangs everywhere. The gangs controlled the neighborhoods, and the newcomers were not welcome. So, a group of young Salvadorians created a group to protect themselves from the gangs, which would later become MS-13. At first, it was just for survival. They needed to defend themselves from the gangs, and MS-13 was able to fight off other gangs for a while. But the other gangs had guns, and once things escalated, MS-13 members started to be shot and killed by the gangs. They didn't have money for guns, so they turned to the cheapest yet deadliest weapon they could find: machetes. Machetes were not only a weapon that was good at cutting, but was also a symbol of terror. You can thank Jason Voorhees for that. On top of that, most members of MS-13 were into heavy metal, which was music that was aggressive and believed to be demonic, making it seem like they're a gang that loves violence and worships the devil. This fear made them even more powerful, and they accepted that image. MS-13 quickly turned to crime as low-paying jobs wouldn't really make enough money for protection. They began to extort businesses and rob people. They were now a small gang, but it all changed when one guy named Ernesto Deris, a former member of the Salvadorian Special Forces, brought military training and strategic thinking into the gang. He trained members how to fight and plan attacks, turning MS-13 from a street gang into a highly organized and dangerous gang. Our next one on the list is Camorra. Camorra was not just the most violent gang in Italy, but were multiple gangs hidden in the shadows. Tracing back all the way to the 18th century, Naples, Italy was overrun by crime and poverty. Criminals would form small groups called clans, selling drugs and protecting people from other criminals. For a fee, of course. But unlike other mafias where each family stayed separate, the Camorra created networks between clans and worked together. So this network of families became so strong that they ruled absolutely everything in Naples. They controlled the shopkeepers selling bread, they controlled the shipments coming in, and they even controlled politicians. But the reason why they had so much control over these businesses and the government is also because they were feared. You see, anyone who refused protection or instructions by the Camorra were brutally beaten, stabbed, and sometimes wiped out completely. So people went to the police. But even the police were working with them because they knew that if they took one group down, another one would just take its place. Or some police were just corrupt. Our next one is the Russian Mafia. Around 1940, in the Soviet Union's prison camps, aka the gulags, some inmates there formed a brotherhood called the Thieves-in-Law, who lived by one singular code: crime. Later on in the 1990s, the Soviet Union collapsed and the government was weak. Millions of people lost their jobs instantly, including the police. But the Thieves-in-Law saw this as an opportunity to become powerful, and once they got out, they started trading drugs. Then over the span of several years, they began to control markets like oil and weapons, as well as businesses. They weren't like a normal street gang, they were more like a shadow government, laundering billions of dollars, expanding all the way to Europe and the United States. At one point, half of Russia's businesses were under the mafia's control. But because of that, Russia became a battleground of rival gangs wanting to take control over territory. Cars would explode out of nowhere, and shootouts would last hours. If someone was on the bad side of them, they would be tortured, cut into pieces, and sometimes even left in public places. As years passed, the Russian mafia slowly went into the shadows. They became silent, but they still controlled everything. If a journalist said anything bad about them, they would mysteriously go missing, and corrupt politicians will work with them for their own personal gain. The next one is the Triad, but the Triad isn't a specific gang, but like a mafia where there's multiple different groups. The Triad I will be talking about today is 14K, just because how messed up the story is. In the 1940s, a Chinese anti-communist group named Kuomintang got in a civil war against the Chinese Communist Party, but they lost, pretty bad. Okay, very badly. After the war, they left China entirely to Burma, creating a group called the 14K Triad where they would start growing opium and shipping that opium to Europe and America. But 14K spread like a wildfire. Everyone wanted to join the gang. Thousands of people joined, and the gang spread back to China, and eventually in small areas across the entire world. But with so many members spread out, it quickly became chaotic. Even though they were in the same gang, they were violent and betraying each other because no one leader in 14K 14K was able to control that many people. So yeah, 14K still exists, but only because they are so chaotic and spread out from each other. Our final one for today is the Yakuza. The Yakuza is absolutely one of the most dangerous and organized gangs that has ever existed, and that's because the Yakuza traces all the way back to Japan's Edo period, the era of samurai. But unlike the samurai, the Yakuza were a group of criminals selling illegal goods and gambling. These criminals were highly organized with a hierarchy, one boss at the top and his gang members at the bottom. But this hierarchy meant that the boss had absolute power over them. If they even thought about disrespecting the boss, they would have to cut off their own finger and deliver it to him in person. The Yakuza were like their own separate government, cutting down enemies without mercy, and because they were so violent, people feared them and often worked with them because of that fear. In modern day Japan, the Yakuza are still around, but not like they used to be. You can still spot a Yakuza with the tattoos or the severed finger, but modern law still will punish anyone who knowingly does business with them, and the police are cracking down on them constantly.